Okay, welcome, and I'm Bill Smerhy, and today I'm very pleased to have as my guest Mike Skinner.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me on
Also,
the show.
I have here today my production manager, David Helene, and David. Without you, we couldn't do this. But if you wish to jump in at any given time, it's okay with you, Mike. You
Absolutely,
can. Okay.
absolutely.
So what I like to do, just to get this going, is to read. I have to read them. You've got so many of them. All your accomplishments in the past, if you don't mind.
I see you have a whole sheet there.
Yeah, I've got a whole
stuff
sheet
on there.
And usually, like if it was me, I'd have a line. But no, we'll do you.
I don't know about that. You're very accomplished, sir.
So you are now the CEO, president, you're a partner, and member of the advisory board for Operitel Corporation.
Yeah, I was a partner. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I built Operitel back in 2001. We first built it, and then sold it in 2011 to OpenText.
And we're going to get into that too.
Ah,
Okay. And you're the president and CEO of the Innovation Cluster.
yes, absolutely.
And Operitel Corporation develops this. I love this technology moving ahead. Developing learning solutions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, we later on, I really want to get into some of this. 'Cause I know virtually nothing about this. I don't know how many people do know a lot about it. But thanks for coming in. We can explore all that.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about it for sure.
And 2011, you were the Chamber of Commerce Business Citizen of the Year. That's a heck of an accomplishment.
It was, yeah. It was a pretty impressive list of people that I got to stand beside.
And also, you're one of the Peterborough's most influential people through 15, 16, 17, and 18.
Yep,
Bit like Tiger Woods.
I guess so.
2017 inductee. This is one of my favorites right here. Inductee 2017 into the Junior Achievement Hall of Fame. I mean, helping the kids out to move ahead, to develop businesses. I mean, I don't think that sort of thing is taught to them, but now that's fantastic.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about
And
that.
I was talking to Dana Emphy and then Scott. They're both members of this also too. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Over at Carlson Wagonly. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, they're inducted this year, so they'll be at the ceremony in another few weeks.
Yeah, I had a call into her. She hasn't returned it, but anyway. You are, so this is the big one. Again, you are our federal candidate for the next conservative, representing the Conservatives for the next election.
Absolutely.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay. So with all that over with, just change the page here. Okay.
You got a whole other page there.
Oh,
Wow.
I got a couple of pages here. I don't know where it's. So what I would like to start off with is who is Mike Skinner? And what I'd like to know is what's going on. What are you doing today? What's going on in your life every day? Like your family. What's
Yeah,
happening?
so you want a sort of a typical day in Mike Skinner
Mike
today?
Skinner's
Obviously, it's pretty busy with an election coming up. So, but basically, I get up in the morning. I've got 2 young boys that are basically 2 and 5. So, spend a bit of
Congratulations.
time. Yeah, thanks. They're a lot of fun, a lot of energy. So
Yeah, they'll be. Yeah, in
They
a heartbeat.
definitely,
They'll be. Yeah, I know.
Absolutely. So I spend, we play typically in the morning quite a bit, and then off to school they go. One goes to daycare and one goes to school. Typically, I try and take at least one of them to school, and then I go off right now to the Innovation Cluster. So I am the president and CEO of the Innovation Cluster. So every day I basically get to help new startup companies grow. And so we, building a company, we focus very much in technology sector businesses. So high tech, high risk. But great careers. These are the kind of businesses that when they're successful, given the right environment, when they become successful, become big employers, and they pay very, very well. And so by working with those companies, we try and make sure they grow, get over some of the hurdles. Sometimes when you're building a company, especially one where there's a lot of risk tied to it, you don't know what you don't know. And so my job is sort of to almost peer into a crystal ball a bit and to see what challenges these individuals are going to have, and really try and coach them into understanding and tying into a whole network of mentors, which are local and across the country that we've put together to help these individuals kind of get through and build those companies. Yeah. And our goal, very simply, is we want to make them employers. We track our success by how much revenue they generate and how many employees they hire, and what's the long-term success that company's going to have.
You're talking high risk, which there's always risk. You're also talking employment, creating
Absolutely.
jobs.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's wonderful. I mean, we definitely need more jobs, more employment. Sure. Yeah, it's.
Yeah, we
I don't know anybody who's going to argue with that.
No, I agree. And again, jobs are important. But when you start tying in some of the high-tech jobs that are, a higher paid salary, I mean, that's when you start really attracting companies and organizations to this region. And then, of course, they continue hiring everybody. And, it doesn't matter what you do in a path, in a career or a job. A lot of times the high-tech jobs, I know in in Waterloo, there was a study that said, for every one software developer, it basically employs 5 people.
Oh,
when you take a look at the downstream, all of the other, whether it's restaurants, daycare providers, all the different downstream providers that are required in order to support that position. So every time you create a high-tech job, you're ultimately creating, other jobs at the same time.
So let's talk about what you see in the Peterborough area. Like, I know I've spoke before what I see here. What do you see here? Like, I'm talking generally. We have, without interrupting you, sort of thing. We've got hospitals and going, but yeah.
Well, for me, I see a lot of potential. So I think this region has a tremendous amount of potential. I mean, it's an amazing place to live. I think all of us live here because it's amazing, right? I mean, it's you can walk in an office downtown, you can take a look at the lake, you can go snowmobiling, you can go fishing, you can go boating. I mean, skiing. All these types of things that we have, whether it's cross country or downhill, all these things we have is basically here. And I mean, the best way to determine that is take a look in the summertime of the 401 on a Friday, even a Thursday. I mean, the traffic is very much going in this direction.
I know.
And so we get to live here every day. And sometimes I think when we're here, we sometimes forget that, but it's lifestyle. And so when you take an amazing lifestyle and then you combine it with really changes in the last, I would say 20 years when it comes to technology. I mean, people don't have to sit in an office. They don't have to work collectively together in a big office building. And so I know when I built our company back in 2001, I mean, that was one of the thoughts is, we could have built it in Ottawa. In fact, we started in Ottawa. We could have built it in Toronto. We could have built it anywhere.
Could have built it anywhere.
And the point is, absolutely, if we could have built it anywhere, why not in Peterborough? This is my hometown. This is where I was born. And so it was amazing to be able to bring the company back here and to grow it here. And quite frankly, I'm not sure we would have been as successful as we were if we had been somewhere else. The cost of operations is slightly lower. Cost of real estate is lower. I remember, but half of my staff used to go home for lunch. That doesn't happen in a major center like Toronto or Ottawa and things like that. And so that lifestyle was very much incorporated into everything that our company did. And I believe that taking that plus all the new talent that's coming out of it. I mean, we have under 100,000 people in the city, and yet we have a university and a college.
I know, that's fantastic.
And it's unheard of, right?
Fantastic.
I mean, it's
fantastic.
Like,
who has that? I mean, who has absolutely. That sort of thing?
And we also have 2 really, really strong chair people of both the university and the college, right? The presidents in both cases are very, very strong. They're really giving back to our community. They're really focusing on it. And I think that's something that we sometimes forget. I mean, they're physically located on the outskirts of the city, but I know that both Leo and Maureen are really driving a lot of what's happening in this community, and a lot of things both the university and college are really participating in it. So I think we're pretty lucky to have that, and we're lucky to have around 15,000 students, which basically we've got 15,000 of the next generation of employees right here. All we have to do is figure out how to not bring them to Peterborough, but make them stay. And that's part of what the Innovation Cluster does. We run a program called Fast Start, which basically is entrepreneurs between 18 and 29. And that program was basically to show entrepreneurship to graduating students. And again, they may not graduate immediately and become entrepreneurs, but they may graduate and work for somebody who just graduated 3 or 4 years prior to them and really stay in the community and, of course, build up that tech sector that we have.
It's amazing. Yeah. It's amazing. Somebody's like yourself creating jobs but teaching these kids. Yeah. So, more about you. I want to deal more about Mike Skinner, who Mike Skinner is. Where were you born? Tell us about your parents. Like, what did your parents do?
Sure. So my mom and dad were born in Toronto. They moved here before I was born, so I was born here in Peterborough. Actually,
you sure?
I was absolutely sure. I know exactly where I was born.
Okay.
I remember I grew up on Stewart Street, on the north end of Stewart Street, and then Park Street as well. So I can remember at 5 years old riding down that big hill, and I can remember it like yesterday. So definitely know where I was born for sure.
Okay. I was just never mind. Okay, what'd your parents do though?
So my dad was a furnace mechanic. So basically his whole life, 40 some odd years, has been installing furnaces, HVACs. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom until I think I was 18. And then my mom always loved history, always reading books, and she went on to be a historical interpreter for Lang Pioneer Village. So she's done that for a number of years. She did, yeah. Now she's sort of, I guess, semi-retired from that, but she still works with Trent Valley Archives, and kind of every so often she'll basically pick a building in Peterborough and write a whole synopsis on it, and it gets published quite often in the Trent Valley Archives Gazette that they send out. So very much a bit of history. And like I said, my dad's now he's retired, but still works with me quite a bit with some of the properties we own. And he's Mr. Mechanical. He's Mr. Fix-It.
If he's working on furnaces.
Mr. Fix-It. I mean, there was a book when I grew up as a kid, which was called Mr. Fix-It, and that was always my dad, because it doesn't matter what it is. He'd bring home something that, quite frankly, he didn't know what it was, but he'd make it work anyways. So he's very, very handy when it comes to that.
That's a gift to be mechanically inclined.
Yeah, and quite frankly, he's taught me a lot. I mean, I'm trying to do the same with my boys as well. And it's important to have a mechanical sense and be able to kind of fix your own stuff if you need to. Doesn't mean you always have to, but you definitely, if you need to, for sure. So I was doing some light switches on the weekend, and I was showing William, of course, not letting him go near the light switch, but showing him how you change the light switches, and just showing him a little bit about electricity at 5 years old. So he's I think it's important. It's something I want to instill in my kids as well, for sure.
He probably understands more about electricity than I do then.
Well, he knows not to touch it, because Dad made that very, very clear, although the breaker was turned off.
I didn't know that.
Safe.
I didn't know that.
So don't ever touch it.
What schools did you go to?
So I went to King Edward, which of course my school is not here anymore, but King Edward was basically where the new YMCA is. I guess not so new now, but newer. And then I went to Kenner. So Kenner. Yeah, Kenner grad, and then I went off to Fleming College. So very much a Peterborough guy the whole way.
My daughter went to Kenner for a while. Were you an athlete? Were you in chess club? Was sports or anything?
So believe it or not, I was more on the computer side. So back then, computer people were very much geeks. This is before everyone realized that Bill Gates makes lots of money, and the tech was cool. But yeah, no, it was very much. I was doing a lot of software programming at 13 years old. I think I got my first PC, and I started doing some programming. That was kind of where my head was at, for sure. I played a bit of sports, but never was a big sports guy. It was very much
never drafted.
Never drafted, for sure. Okay. No, and
well,
I'm just glad there's no videos of me playing sports, because I haven't seen them come out. Thank goodness.
You and I have something in common. I was never drafted either. For some reason, I don't know. All right. Your first business. How old were you when you started? How did you start it? Why did you start it?
So my very first business was actually we called it Microtech Computers, which was a computer sale company. And so basically myself and a friend my friend was 18, I was 17. So technically it was his business, even though we shared the profits, because I wasn't old enough to open a company. So he opened it under his name, and we basically built computers. So we were in our last year of high school, and I quite frankly sold tons of computers to my classmates and a couple teachers as well. And we basically used to go down to Toronto, and there was a supplier that we used to buy the computers from, bring them back, put all the pieces together, because this is before sort of the Dells of the world and the pre-configured. You used to buy all the components and buy the cases and basically put them all together. We'd stick a logo on the front of our, which basically said it was our computer, and we sold it locally. So we did that throughout my last year of high school, and then my first year of college. We realized that selling computer mice was very profitable. We used to buy them for a couple dollars and sell them for $25 at the college, because if you didn't have your mouse when you went into your computer class, you weren't allowed to participate. So we always had 10 or 15 mice in our backpacks for everybody that forgot, and we were busy selling them. So that was my first kind of foray into being an entrepreneur, for sure.
Dave, you build computers, don't you?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, yeah.
I've always done it. It's been. I do think that now it's more. You go to Best Buy or you go to Dell.ca or whatever, but it's.
There was a time when that's how you did it, right? And
he's a computer genius. What would you fix last night for over the house?
Email.
Okay.
It works.
It works.
Well, it doesn't work. It's pretty frustrating. So it's important when it fixes.
Yeah, there's a certain person that lives in my house that that was having issues. Dave solved it.
For sure.
Well,
that explains why you got the email.
I wonder, yeah.
That's exactly why. It mustn't have been working. It's been queued up there. That's why they thought it was this.
Another issue solved.
There we go.
Okay.
Another mystery solved.
Okay, so Mike, how many businesses did you have before Operitel? Let's just do that question.
Yeah, so Operitel would have been my second company. That was the second company I owned. Prior to Operitel, though, I became a partner of a company in Ottawa called Progestic. So kind of to fill in the gap a little bit, after college was done, I ended up going to Winnipeg to work for Manitoba Tel. So I built an e-commerce system here in Peterborough. and basically got hired by one of the leading e-commerce providers in the country. This is back before Shopify and all of those vendors were around, and it was a spin-off from Manitoba Tel. And so MTS Advanced, which is Manitoba Tel Advanced, hired me to go out there and basically do what they called a systems engineer. So basically I would go on site to big clients like Nortel, TELUS, and work with them to deploy e-commerce solutions. So a lot of cases we were selling e-commerce systems, so abilities to put their products online back when it was first being started. This is before anybody was really doing that in Canada, and I was part of that organization. And then I left Winnipeg, really wanted to come back at least close to home, and I moved to Ottawa. Got hired by a company called Progestic International, which was one of our clients at MTS, and within about 6 months made partner, and a fairly large firm, so we were 100 and some odd employees at the time, made partner.
Substantial,
and so there was 8 partners. Youngest partner, I think I was 23 at the time. Loved working for the company, but really had the bug to do it myself. When you're 23, everybody thinks that you can do it better, which, it's taken me 20 years to realize that's not true. But at the time, I thought I could run the company better. And
that's like optimism.
Yeah, and so I decided to leave Progestic and open up my own software company, and that was really the company that was formed into Operitel. And it was a crazy time, but I mean it's a great time to be an entrepreneur. I think I became the CEO of Operitel basically when I turned 24. So, and from there we grew it up. I ended up bringing in initially 2 partners, and then bringing in a third partner. So we built the company really as 4 partners, all completely different personality people, and very much covered different disciplines of the organization. So
I'm going to throw this one at you now. How did you meet your partners?
So let's start. So my very first partner basically, and it was Jason Steimers, who we'd been best friends since we were 7. And so I needed somebody to manage the money and manage the financial part of the company that I could trust. And if you can't trust your best friend since 7 years old, who can you trust? So Jay looked after all of our finances. The company ran very interesting because I was the CEO and president, but Jay really ran the show. I mean, I was the guy who was out meeting customers on site. I was really the person out of the office, and Jay's job was to really keep make sure payroll happened, make sure our bills got paid, and really do all the cash flow pieces that are crucial in a company. And then my second employee was one of our first employees we hired. I think it was the 3rd or 4th employee in. His name was Carlos. And
yes.
Yeah, young
Carlos
guy.
Oliveira,
yeah. So young guy, was about, when I say young guy, he was 6 months younger than me. So we considered him the young guy. Okay. And so he basically came on and was a superstar when it came to software development, with an amazing personality as well. And so he very quickly became a partner and headed up our technology. So I had sort of a kind of a 2-headed organization. We had finance and software development, both being very much in the office, and I was out sort of running the pavement and making sales and doing implementations with our customers. And then we had a gentleman who approached us to just wanted to basically work for free at the beginning. His name is David, and David Fell, and he yeah, a great guy. He's done lots of things here in the community as well. And so David was 10 years older than me, so he was sort of the old guy at the time, and basically worked with me on the sales side, and really kind of came in, like I said at the beginning, very quickly made a partner, had a huge amount of skills that we needed, and the 4 of us basically drove that company. And so David sort of handled all of our sales and marketing. Carlos was all of our software development and all of the back end when it came to the application development. Jason was everything to do with finance and operations, and I basically was the guy on the street knocking on doors and closing the deals.
Doing the footwork.
And actually implementing them too. I mean, all of our major clients, I was basically the implementation person as well. And people are always confused when it's like, how come the CEO is here? But it's just, that's where my passion was. I love working with customers, basically solving problems. I mean, if I could summarize my whole career up in town, I'm a problem solver. I identify a problem and work to solve it. That's that's what I love doing. So
I know I've walked the streets because I'm in my business, and you bump into people. They're just out gardening, and you get talking to them. Yeah, it's interesting. What they end up finding out what they did. It's fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure.
Whereas I could be sitting at home, but it's
Sure. Yeah, I love talking to people. I mean, and again, we were an international company, right? So we had offices eventually at the end around the world.
And got offices in Brazil now, Australia.
Brazil, Australia, China, and Peterborough. And then, of course, we spent a tremendous amount of time in the U.S., about 45% of our revenue came from U.S. companies, and so, yeah, and even the U.S. I mean, it's very different where you are in the U.S. It's like different pockets of different worlds depending on the state you're in. So, yeah, and along the way, I've met some pretty amazing people. I mean, I still keep in touch with many of them, and it was interesting to see their careers because a lot of them took a leap of faith by going with a smaller company in our space and learning management.
Taking some risk.
Taking risk for sure. I mean, most of them were risk takers because there was a lot of major, big companies, publicly traded, large organizations, and we were very much a small niche player in the space, but we were competing with the really big clients, their companies all on a regular basis, and so they took the risk on us, saw the fact that we were dedicated, and again, I mean, many times our customers said this. I mean, it's rare that they could pick up the phone and call the CEO of the company on a Sunday and spend 3 hours talking about how we're going to build a product better. What happened pretty much every Sunday, I was on the phone with one of our clients. And that was sort of my.
You've got to be in love with what you do to do that.
You do.
You do.
And I was single at the time, so it also makes it a little easier when you're starting a company and you're young and single. There's less risk because you're not as many dependents. Obviously, my life is much different today, but I would have a much harder time spending every single Sunday on the phone with the customers when obviously my little kids would be.
You've
where
got
I'd
a
be
big
spending time.
responsibility. You've got these little guys growing up, right?
Yeah, and
you've got to spend time with them.
Absolutely.
You have to,
for sure, and they have to grow up the right way. It's important. I think instilling the right values in your children are important, and that's a parent's job. So, absolutely.
I'd like to know who mentored you and how that happened.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I've had.
Thank you.
It's a great question. I've had a number of mentors, and it depends. So I would say, my dad has been a very technical person my whole life, and so he definitely mentored me when I was a small kid on two things. So one is just how to, like I said earlier, how to be handy and how to fix things. And when you think about being a problem solver, I mean, I learned sort of if it's broken, that it's possible to be fixed, and every problem has a solution. From my dad at a young age, and obviously I try and do the same to my kids. And then work ethic. I mean, my dad was on call typically 1 or 2 weeks a month, and he's the guy that would 2:00 in the morning, someone's furnace breaks, he'd go out and fix it, come home at 4:30, and he'd still be back up at 6:30 the next morning to go to work. He didn't call in sick, and he was the guy that you literally could cut his arm off and he'd be gluing it back on, trying to finish the job he was doing before he went off to the hospital. He never cut his arm off, but he had a couple accidents, and he just kept working at it until it's done. And he instilled in me that you get the job done, and
the work ethic,
no matter what it is. And so again, I try and do the same thing for my kids, but it's crucial. So that would be my first mentor for sure. Then, there's a number of guys. When I went to Manitoba Tel, I was young, so 23 years old, 22 years old, and our staff base were, I say older. I mean, in my perspective, they're older. They're all sort of 35 to 55. But at that time, when you're 23, everybody seems older than you. And they really taught me a lot about life. I mean, I moved away from my house, my family. I mean, all I'd really known was this area. In fact, the first time I was on an airplane was when I flew it for a job interview. So it's my first airplane, first major job interview, and so obviously they taught a lot. They spent a lot of time mentoring me, and I remember my first time away for Thanksgiving from my family. I mean, one of the guys invited me over to their house to have Thanksgiving. So they were a great group. Yeah, they also taught me how to understand when people are away. I mean, I think sometimes you do need to move away from where you come from for a little while. I remember a gentleman telling me when I was about to move away, and he said, you'll be back. I'm like, no, I'm not. There's no way I'm going to be back. I mean, I'm going off to this, high-tech executive job with a major telecom provider, but it was an individual had gone away and come back himself. But
no place like home.
No place like home. And this city definitely brings you back for sure. And yeah.
Operitel. What is it? What does it do?
So we were a learning management system, and so basically we tracked and managed e-learning. So both online learning, which can come in two formats, can come in basically static, almost like reading a book online, or interactive, or synchronous, where basically different students are collaborating with each other at the same time. So those are sort of the two methods, and then we also tracked your face-to-face learning as well. So if you had your MBA, you took a class training, we tracked that. So our client base typically had a minimum of 500 employees. Anything less than 500, you didn't really need our technology, because what it does is basically tracks and manages all of the learning that an organization has. So I'll pick a good example. Say you've got 10,000 employees. So they're spread across 15 or 20 different offices, potentially, different continents.
Yes, okay.
So you've got a well-trained staff base. You spent a lot of money on making sure those people are trained. but do you really know what knowledge each of them has? So say, for example, the CFO in the Canadian office, decides to retire. How do you replace that person?
Yes.
A lot of time you bring in a hiring agency and you go out and look for a CEO or a
Headhunter.
CFO. Headhunter. But you might have 4 people that were formerly CFOs in another part of your company that maybe had left that company and started a different career and had that skill set. But you wouldn't know that. And so what it did is provide the ability to do an inventory on all of the knowledge. And so our argument always was, you look at a balance sheet and you can see how much inventory you have, you can see how many assets you have, you can see how much intellectual property if you're doing it, but there's no number that says, here's the knowledge that my company has. And yet we all say the reasons why companies are successful is because of the people. So our ability...
Yes, totally.
So what we really did in our technology is provided an inventory of the knowledge of the people that worked for the organization. And that's really what we did. So we obviously, in order for that to work, we provided a lesson plans for staff that can say, map out their career. Okay, I want to go from position A to position B. What type of formal training do I need? Oh, okay, I need these following. Or what kind of certifications do I need? What kind of compliance training? So say, for example, you're a life insurance agent and you want to move through, or you're a real estate agent.
It all sounds so logical.
Yeah, well, AREA is a great example of an organization that in real estate has this type of training. So they basically, as you go through your different paths, and you have to take so many professional unit credits every so often, our system tracked and managed all of that. What made it unique, though, because there were other training management systems on the market, was that we'd taken a lot of the knowledge that I'd gained working for Operitel with e-commerce. And so we could monetize that training. And so we would go into an organization where basically they provided training for their staff, but maybe they provided world-class training for their staff. Lots of corporate universities are part of companies. We provide the ability for them to start training their dealers and their dealer network. So think about the complication of having 10,000 employees. Now imagine that you've got 25,000 resellers. So you have no idea what knowledge those resellers have. You have no idea how much product knowledge they have, whether they're actually talking about your product properly. Imagine them providing a way where you can now provide training to those resellers.
Yes.
But do it in a way so when you're assessing them, ultimately they're able to see, their managers and the owners of their different distributors and resellers can see how their staff are doing. But you can roll that all the way up and take a look at that regionally and look at it across the organization. So now you're not just managing what the value of your people are, you're managing the value of your network of people. That's what we did. And that, at the end of the day, it was all about data. I mean, in order to get data, people have to give it to you, and so you have to provide them something that's valuable for them to give it to you. But
information. Yeah.
It's all about information. And of course, we would bring that information back to the corporations, and they would use that for all of their training and planning.
Just this is switching entirely. Belichick, the coach of the Patriots. I don't know if you've read his biography.
I haven't actually.
It's fascinating. The detail he goes into before every game. Like he sometimes doesn't. When he was younger, didn't even go home. He knew everything about the opposition, and that's why he's won 6 Super Bowls. That's just. It was a fascinating. I just finished that book. It's fascinating. The amount of time he spent researching details.
So it's interesting you bring that up. So it's the one other aspect of our technology that we didn't talk about that often. At the senior levels, our clients knew, is that, say, for example, we got a dealer network and they've lost 2 employees and they went to work for a competing dealing network that maybe that's a distributor for something else. We also could track and manage the amount of knowledge that was leaving our organization, and we knew where they were. So say, for example, I'll pick an industry. So say, for example, you're in the photocopier industry and you're a distributor for Konica Minolta, and your top 2 techs leave and they go over to work for Xerox. Sure. Or maybe your bottom 2 techs go to work for a distributor for Xerox. We could track and manage all that data. So we could actually see where people were moving to and where they're going. Because when you came on board the organization, you went through and did a skills assessment, and you personally filled out, what your skills are. So where have you worked before? What's the knowledge you have? What are former positions you had? All the things you put on a resume, which typically you get interviewed, they say you're hired, and the resume goes in a drawer somewhere and it disappears. We would actually have people go through and we would index all that stuff inside the system. So we knew that, you're a former employee of 2 other competitors. And so some of our larger organizations would then go through and take a spin through and say, we've got 6 employees in these different offices that used to work for one of our competitors. Let's bring them into part of our competitive assessment and actually have a conversation with them.
I know. Perfect, right?
So, and absolutely. So to your point, understanding your opposition is crucial. And no matter what you do in business and in life, you need to obviously pay attention to your allies and pay attention to your foes as well. I think it doesn't matter what it is that you're doing in life. It's important to make sure that there's always 2 sides.
Be aware of what's going on around you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah, you just have to be aware. Challenges. To start to establish Operitel, what sort of challenges did you have to overcome? I mean, that must have been an interesting. There had to be
Sure.
some sort of roadblocks.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I didn't come from a family which had lots of money by any means. Like I said earlier, my dad was in the furnace business, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. So, to start your own company requires capital, and we don't have any money. It's tricky, and so we bootstrapped that company. And a lot of people don't know that, but we literally, every dollar that came in that door, you spent $2, and you just continually leveraging it and leverage it, and
Just bleeding to death financially.
yeah, I lived. So when I moved back to Peterborough, I literally lived in the attic of Jay, my best friend. So he was married and lived in Peterborough, and I lived in his attic for like $300 a month in order to build that company. And we, you basically are super frugal, and like I said, every dollar you spend, you make sure you spend it wisely, because you can get investment money. And today, I think it's a lot easier to get investment money. At that time, I had no idea how to do it, and so literally we just kept,
Another learning curve.
for sure, we just kept doubling down. And if every time we made a dollar, we figured out how to wisely spend it. And like I said, Jay was really good at taking a dollar and spending it 3 times, and just keep riding cash flow and really understanding that. So I would say the most important thing that I learned is really how to understand how to manage money, and really how to make sure that you're not spending more than you make, because that's crucial. Because eventually, if you keep spending more than you make, you're eventually going to have to pay that back, and you have to pay it back with interest. And I think that's it's a skill, whether it's in life, your personal budget, or whether it's running a company. It doesn't make any difference.
Running a company, running a country.
Absolutely, or running a country, for sure. For sure.
Can I ask really quick with so if you bootstrapped with Operitel, do you wish that you had gotten some of the funding that was available today? Like, do you think it would have made a difference?
We would have grown faster, for sure.
Yeah.
So Operitel and Desire to Learn are basically 2 very similar companies. Desire to Learn, the CEO was a year older than me. It started in '99. We started in 2001, and their growth curve and our growth curve were similar until they were part of the Waterloo Accelerator Computer Tech. So very much what we built here in Peterborough with the innovation cluster, we didn't have anything like that in Peterborough, and I saw them grow drastically. And near probably the last sort of 5 years, so 2006, 2007, we saw a massive injection of money to go into them, and massive growth as well. Ultimately, I'll still argue that I think our technology was better. Because again, we bootstrapped it, and there wasn't a decision made that the financial considerations wasn't there. But if you were to measure the company based on the amount of jobs created, the amount of revenue that was generated, Desire to Learn definitely superseded that. Now, ultimately, we got bought by OpenText, right in the back, which is in the backyard of Desire to Learn. So, and some of the members of OpenText were advisors on Desire to Learn. There was great connections between Desire to Learn and OpenText, but we were the one that ended up getting acquired. Partly because they'd taken so much money into their organization, so much capital that came in there, that it became a very expensive acquisition to buy, where we were less expensive because, quite frankly, we were bootstrapped the whole way. And so we didn't have massive amounts of debt. We basically had no debt, and we didn't have a whole bunch of shareholders that are expected a 10 times return on their money. Had us as shareholders as the principals of the company, but really that was it. So if I were to go back in time, I think I would very much like something like the innovation cluster to exist. Whether I took the money or not, I don't know. But what I like about the cluster is that I have this kind of conversation. And John Gillis, our incoming CEO, and also part of the organization, is the same situation as me. He comes from a similar background, and we have these exact conversations. When people come in our office, say, here's my business plan on a half a piece of paper, and I'm going to go raise $1 million. It's like, that's expensive money. And are you sure? Because if you can do it a different way, maybe you don't, obviously. And so it's a personal case, but you got to look at both sides. So yeah, I'm the first one. Again, we have a great angel network here, but I'm the first one to tell people that if you don't need the money, don't take it, because it's expensive.
Yes, it's okay to take the money, but it's got to be paid back.
It's got to be paid back. It's expensive. So, borrowing money's, there's nothing wrong with borrowing money, as long as you know how you're going to pay it back. As long as you, And, in high growth companies, it's one thing because your revenue is going to bell curve up. As we talk about government, it's a totally different. The only way that our revenue is government bell curves up is we all pay more taxes, which I don't think anybody wants to do. So I think making sure that you're balancing your budget is crucial. There are years and times when you can't. Just like when you're building a company, you've got to borrow money. But overall, if your strategy is to continue borrowing or continue looking for investors, ultimately you won't be successsul, because eventually you got to pay it back. And if you don't pay it back, somebody else has to down the road.
I know a lot of people because of the business I'm in.
Of course.
I don't know anyone that wants to get further into debt. They all seem to want to get out. for some
I
reason.
agree. Well, because nobody wants to pay interest. I mean,
So that puzzles me somewhat. We'll let that go for now. We'll maybe explore that later.
sounds good.
Okay. How long did you run Operitel before deciding to sell it to OpenText?
So we got to a point, and it's an interesting reason why we sold. So we won a very large account. And I won't talk about the name of the company, but a multinational organization. The account was about $5 million. We were about $8 million a year in revenue. We won the account, won the tender, flew over. It was a German-based company, went through all the processes. We were all ready to go, went through the contract negotiations. The contract went over to the finance department, and they said no.
Okay.
Simply no. They said, we will not issue a contract to a company where over 50% of this contract is more than 50% of the revenue of the company. Done.
Okay.
So that was it. And they went to the second choice on the list. So we came back from that, and we were obviously pretty devastated because the technology, we would easily have done a better job.
Ups and downs.
And it was like, how do we become bigger? And how do we become bigger really fast? You know, we could acquire a company to add revenue, but we didn't have the capital to do that. And so we said, let's look for a strategic partner. And HP, Hewlett Packard, is one of our big distributors. They were the first group we reached out to. And then I met a gentleman at a party here in Peterborough that lived in Cavan, who owned a mergers and acquisition firm, which was internationally renowned. And if you look at his address, it says he's in Toronto, but he lived right here in Cavan. And so we met at a party and a social event. And he told me what he did, and I sat down with him, and he basically put us on onto a system to put us up for sale of either partial. At that time, we were just looking for a partial sale, and so that we could basically be tied to a big company. And one of the first ones that came along was OpenText, and I went down and had a meeting with their chairman and basically walked out of there, and they made us an offer. And the offer was, they asked us what we wanted, we told them, they said okay. I really wish we had asked for more, but
I know.
it was one of those.
I know.
Yeah, the negotiation was like, wow,
Shoulda, woulda, coulda.
too easy.
Shoulda, woulda, coulda. I know. Yeah.
But it was good, and I mean, one of the things that we had done, you know, identifying that they were a potential acquisition for us. OpenText is doing lots of acquisitions, is we built integration to their technology. So when they said, okay, how hard is it to connect our technology to yours? We said, well, it's not, it's done. And so that was one of the closing things. We closed that transaction from the time they called us and said, we'll take it, until we signed the paperwork and 90% of the money was transferred to the partner's bank account, was 30 days. Fastest acquisition in OpenText's history.
Yeah.
And it really had to do with, you know, I kind of give a lot of credit back to Jason Steimers, my business partner, because he was phenomenal in operations and organization, and he literally had everything. I remember they came in and they handed us a list of stuff that they wanted us to do, and Jason handed them a thumb drive and said the other 4 documents will be in your desk tomorrow. And literally that's the way it was.
Cool.
So really, really smart guy for sure.
The next question, Dave, the acquisition, how did it look? Did that pretty well answer that question for you? Or did you want to expand on that?
So that question is sort of born from, you know, you have this amazing entrepreneurial journey, right? And at the end of that, like, a lot of entrepreneurs look at acquisition as sort of the end goal, right? And you know, I think there's always this idea of, okay, I'm going to buy a house in the Caribbean and just hang out and drink Corona for the rest of my life, right? And so what does acquisition really look like? Are you walking away into the sunset, or like, you know, are you hanging out and helping with transition? Are you?
Yeah,
you know?
so that's a great question. So when we sold, it was 3 partners. So David had already left the firm. We'd bought David out a little bit, a year and a half earlier. So basically there was 3 of us, and it's a great question because all 3 of us did totally different things. So Jay basically received the payout, and I think 3 months he was out of there. He transitioned the accounting side, and Jay basically took a year off, and really just kind of soul searched, I think, and really found what it is. He's now opened up a new successful company, and he's here operating, and he's doing really, really well. But he definitely took some time. I didn't stop. You know, I phased right into being. They basically offered me the position of business. Start that over again. They offered me the position basically of executive vice president or business unit owner. And so basically I was responsible for the Operitel division, and it worked exactly like I was running it myself. I didn't have to stress obviously on the cash flow side of things as much. Cash flow became less of a problem. Then it was all about P&L. You know, I didn't have to worry about collecting the money. Once the invoice is sent out, my business unit got recognition, and it was up to OpenText to figure out how to collect the money. And I didn't have to worry about the $600 and some odd $1,000 a month in payroll that we used to sweat about every single day, because basically it got paid whether the money came in or not. But for the most part, it was just like running the same division. So I stayed there, and Carlos really headed up all of our tech and started getting immersed into the rest of the of the organization. So we did different things, but it's different. To your point, it was very different when somebody else suddenly owns your organization. I mean, it was an interesting transition. I sort of just put it aside and kept driving the business unit, but we all had different perspectives. And eventually, I left. Carlos and I both left at the same time. The organization took a different direction than what we necessarily liked, and unlike when you're an entrepreneur and you basically just got to stick it out, we could leave. And so we set the organization up so that it continue on, and it's still a business unit today. And Carlos and I left. Carlos went off and did some consulting, and I basically bounced around and bought a couple local companies here, and just kind of spent sort of a year figuring that out, and then decided I would get into the political side, and really that kind of spawned out of. I was on the board for the Innovation Cluster, which was called GPIC back then, as well as
that's on the list here.
Peterborough Economic Development. I was on their board as well, and so I did the strategic plan with a group as a board member. I was the board chair for the strategic plan, and basically put that together in 2014, and really identified a lot of the gaps and weaknesses we had in our community, and that prompted me to really decide to run and kind of put my hat in the race. I felt we needed somebody who had a fiscal background, understood the community, really loved this community.
Was born in the community.
And wants to drive jobs. Yeah, I mean, it's all about driving jobs. And for me, again, Operitel was a job builder, job creator. And, and we had other spin-off companies as well that came out of those days. But it was all about how do we put our local area in the right light. And in many ways, it's just telling your story, as you and I were talking about before we started. I mean, how do we get the message out there? How do we market the region? And I think Peterborough needs
fantastic area. You think more people will be taking serious look at it. Yeah,
I agree, and I felt that Peterborough needed a representative that represented Peterborough and Ottawa, not the other way around, and it really wants to drive what this community can do and tell the rest of the world. So that's why I decided, and so my next move from there was into to winning a nomination, and I know we'll talk about that in another show, but basically going from a nomination into the process for what it takes to be.
Thank you. You just filled in a blank for me because I was going to ask you back a bit closer to the election and maybe discuss. We will discuss some issues then. But what I'd like to move on to is the innovation cluster.
Yeah.
And I've got some material here. You can correct me if I'm wrong. It generated over $15 million. In 2018.
2018, yep.
Apparently, it was 15 times what the provincial goal was set at.
It was.
It supported 86 startups, created 171 jobs for the local economy alone.
In 2018, absolutely.
Would you like to expand on the innovation cluster,
sure.
please?
So,
I don't. Okay, because you're talking to a novice. I don't understand. I don't know how many people do. So please, just.
So the innovation cluster. Really, if we go back a little bit in time, started off as the DNA cluster. Basically, it was a partnership between the college, the university, and the province at that time. And then when I became the CEO, we expanded that to include the federal government and the city of Peterborough and the Angel Network. So really 6 groups that drive the innovation cluster today, all with the purpose and objective of driving jobs.
But creating jobs.
But again, creating jobs and driving jobs is a message. How do you actually do it, right? I mean, you can say that all day long. You can make that as part of whatever announcement you want to do, but how do you actually do it? Well, you basically create an environment for entrepreneurs to thrive. And so you look back at what entrepreneurs need, and basically everybody that's part of the cluster is a former entrepreneur that's been successful. And it's not every day was successful, but at the end of the day, more success than failures.
You've got to fail to be successful.
Absolutely, you're 100% right there. And so we basically work with companies. So individuals come to us with a business idea, and it can be everything from a half-page napkin right to a fully working prototype, and we get everything in between, and we sit down with them and we sort of figure out where they are. And then they apply, and so that we don't accept everybody into the innovation cluster, because for us it's on success. We have one of the hardest jobs, and that's how do we determine whether our company is going to be successful, and that's tough because there's no crystal ball, and you can't always do that.
Yeah, my crystal ball is broken personally.
Well, we do it though based on the entrepreneur. It's based on the personality of the entrepreneur. The product is important and their vision is important, but at the end of the day, do they have the tenacity and the drive to actually make it work, or when they have a bad day, are they just going to quit? And so we look for people that are going to do it no matter what. And then once we've got that, we work with them to to basically overcome their challenges. And whether at the very beginning it could be, how do I raise a bit of money, or how do I borrow some money, or how do I bootstrap this, how do I work a second job in order to make enough money to build my company. They typically they start off on what we call floater status, which means they don't permanently have a seat within the innovation cluster, but they can come in and out whenever they want. They get to a point where they're making enough money, or they've ability to basically work 40 hours into their business, and they can permanently come in with a seat, and then we grow them from there. And our objective is to basically grow them from the entrepreneur, or a lot of times it's a partner, so 2 entrepreneurs come in together, basically to grow them up to 10 people, about $1 million in sales. And at that point in time, they're typically beyond what we call a valley of death, which is that initial phase. So they say that 80% of companies fail in their first 2 years, but if you're part of an incubator, only 30% fail. So
that's a really interesting stat.
Yeah, and it's a drastic, and we're seeing that now. So over
that's
70% of our companies succeed. So what do? Is we help those organizations go from that 20 to 70, and that's a big difference.
That's huge.
And that's what we do. And again, we do that partly by the opposite side, is we also discourage people from being an entrepreneur. We have people who go in there from time that would guarantee are part of that 80% they're going to fail, and we tell them maybe they shouldn't do that idea. Now, if they've got the drive and the passion, they'll come back. And we've had people we've rejected 2 or 3 times that have come back, and now they're doing very, very well. But they hadn't thought through the business idea. They hadn't really gone through the framework. They hadn't thought about the next steps. A lot of times they didn't truly understand what the problem was.
Didn't have a business plan.
Didn't have a business plan, and a business plan is all about a solution to a problem.
It's a plan. Plans. Yeah. It's just a plan, but at least it's something.
Yeah, and you have to you have to identify the problem. Right? There's no, if you don't know what the problem is, so you have to come up with a solution. So once you know the solution, then you have to monetize it. There's lots of problems out there in the world that there's no money in the world that's going to fix it, because there's no money there to fix it. Well, it's not going to make a good business. It may be a great idea, but unless you're going to be able to monetize it, either through a for-profit company or either a social enterprise, it still has to make money. Otherwise, you'll never hire any staff and you'll never grow the economy. And so that's where we kind of get involved and then basically help those companies. So like you said, 2018, we're 86 companies, of which 46 were under the age of 29, which to me is it's a pretty amazing stat.
That's pretty amazing.
That's our next generation.
That's great.
And since I've been the CEO, really since we moved downtown, so I was part of that group that created Venture North, that created that building downtown for sort of an entrepreneurial hub. And I'd love to talk a little bit about that for a second. But
please.
Just before I do that, we've done $35 million in the last 3 years and just under 400 jobs. And again, when I say we, it's me, the innovation cluster team, but really it's the entrepreneurs. At the end of the day, it's the people that are willing to put themselves at risk, put their house on the line, put their marriage on the line, put their personal relationships on the line. These are the people that, no matter what, their company is going to succeed. And they do it because they typically have a passion for the problem that they're solving, and they care. And then they care about a whole variety of different things, but they have to have that drive and that personal passion to care.
Yeah, the courage to do it, yeah. And the courage to get up when you're down.
Absolutely. And I think the number one reason why the innovation cluster has been successful is because we collaborate. We work with all the other agencies in town. And there was a time, and again, I sat on the board for Peterborough Economic and Innovation Cluster, where many of the sport organizations would fight over turf. And, was my client or not my client. And they didn't, and part of it's the way their metrics work, that they're created from the way their funding sources are. And so there was a group that was basically called Startup Peterborough that came together, and it was all entrepreneurs that wanted to see this problem where we felt the agencies in town didn't work together. And so out of that, 5 of us bought the building, because one of the number one reasons they didn't work together is because they're all siloed. The innovation cluster was at Trent University. At that time, Peterborough Economic Development was on Wolf Street. You had Community Futures, which was just around the corner from where we are now. Yep. But basically, all these groups were sort of spread out throughout the city. The university and college, not necessarily aligned and having communication with each other. And so we basically kind of forced all those groups together, and junior achievement as well, and created the Venture North building, which basically was able to bring all of those organizations under one roof. So today we've got junior achievement on the lower level, Community Futures, Peterborough Economic Development, Eastern Ontario Economic Development, which is called SOFI. They represent similar to what our Community Futures Bank does. They're a bank that invests in technology companies. Everywhere from the 404 in Toronto all the way to Ottawa. And they're based here in Peterborough, which most people don't know. And then the top floor was now the Innovation Cluster, which is partnered with the university and the college. And so by putting all of those groups together, now, if you're an entrepreneur, there's really no wrong building. You might have a wrong floor, but we'll send you up and down a floor. But it also means the organizations and the staff from all those groups work together as a cohesive group. We're just starting something now.
Some personal relationships, which helps.
Yeah, exactly. And we're doing this thing with the chamber now called Chamber Coffee. So once a month in the lobby of Venture North, everybody in business is going to be invited in. So it's basically put on by...
I wouldn't mind attending that.
Yeah, it's May 16th is the very first one.
Okay.
It's in the lobby. It's 7:30 to 8:30, and the first one actually, my wife Katja sponsored the coffee. But the idea is each month a different entrepreneur. So her company, Mega Experience, sponsored the coffee. But every month there's a different company that's going to sponsor it, and basically it's just to bring all the business people together so that they can collaborate. So you'll have new entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs. We're hoping some of the JA students might come for one or two coffees, and mixed all the way up to senior executives.
It's nice to see the kids out.
Together. It's amazing. I mean, that's our next generation. It's why we're doing this. You know, we're not going to be here forever, and we've got to make sure the next generation is set up for sure.
Satisfying. Very satisfying, yeah.
Absolutely.
Dave, you were interested in asking Mike about something about the innovation cluster.
Yeah.
You would like to go ahead with that?
So I want to know what exactly. So I mean, you mentioned the Waterloo computer accelerator there, and it's like the innovation cluster we know is like a building, right? And I think that the part that is a little bit unclear. You guys don't. It's not like you go there and you do one thing. It's like the innovation cluster is like a lot of things. And sometimes it feels a bit like it's mentorship. Sometimes it feels like it's connections. Sometimes it feels like it's like a co-location sort of shared working environment. And like what is the...
What is it?
Yeah, what are all the things? Like,
yeah, so basically it's all of those things you just said. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, what we're trying to do is identify problems that entrepreneurs or roadblocks that entrepreneurs are going to have when they're growing their tech-based companies. So remember, they're focused in typically 4 sectors. So software and hardware is one sector, which is a massive sector. Clean tech is another sector, which really in our area, we've got tons of water-based companies. Peterborough was recognized as number 1 in Ontario for water startups. That's primarily because of both the innovation cluster and Peterborough Economic Development and the Centre for Alternative Wastewater and Treatment in Lindsay and the university. But really in this area was that. Agriculture technology, again, it's very...
Huge.
It's huge, and you're not going to get an ag tech company going to start in downtown Toronto. At least I don't think you will. Here you can go from the university or college, depending on what aspect, to the innovation cluster, to a farm in 25 minutes. And then the last one, which is a bit smaller for us, and it's been probably the one that's been dwindling the most, is healthcare, because we were the DNA cluster at one point in time, and so anything around DNA research. So again, you're in a high-tech sector, and so you have tons and tons of roadblocks, and sometimes your roadblocks are access to capital, and that's where our partnership with the Angel Network, plus the Community Futures, Business Development Bank of Canada, Export Development Canada, those partnerships really help us bring out what those needs are. Sometimes it's access to mentorship, and you need to find mentors, and sometimes it's just you need to just be around like-minded people. A lot of companies, as you guys know here, sometimes you start off in your basement and you go up and eventually move up to an office, but you might be 4 or 5 people that are working, and you might be collaborating with a network of people around the world, from a virtual point of view. But sometimes you just need to talk to real people. And so even our kind of recreational area where there's a ping pong table, I mean, quite often we'll see entrepreneurs just in there, they've had a good day or a bad day and they're just playing ping pong, or they're, sitting on the couch, playing a video game against each other. I mean, sometimes you just need that human interaction, which you don't get as an entrepreneur because you're probably working 80, 90 hours a week. I mean, and if you're not in the office working that, or at home, you're thinking about it, right? You get up at 2 o'clock in the morning and you're stressed out because you got to figure out
jot some ideas down.
Notes down. You got to figure out how to make payroll, or how do I close my first client, or my first client, how do I keep my first client? I mean, all those things that you go through as an entrepreneur, and you just need to be around people. So part of the innovation cluster is just getting those like-minded people to be around each other. So, when the chips are down and things are tough, you can look around and say, you know what, the entrepreneur across the desk from me, they had the same problem 2 months ago and they survived it. Or they'll come into my office and be like, listen, I don't know how I'm going to make payroll next week. And I can say, you know what, I can remember about 10 times where I had the same issue, and let's sit there and work out what the challenges are. I mean, maybe you just have too many employees, or maybe it's a cash flow issue and you got to figure out how to lend money against it. I mean, we've got a network of people that want to help out entrepreneurs, and that's my job, is to sort of say, okay, here's your problem, and I go and find the solution with those individuals, because ultimately the entrepreneur has to make that decision. It's not us, but we provide advice and guidance, and sometimes a bit of tough love too, because sometimes it's like, listen, you hired too many people, and that's the reason why you can't make payroll, and you're going to have to make a cut. So it's what it is, and take it from me. I've had to do it, and there can be some comfort in misery together, but that's what it is. It's how do
Hard
we
decisions, yeah.
how do we help those entrepreneurs, because these are the organizations that are going to drive our economy. Simple as that. We can continue trying to move companies to Peterborough and the Peterborough in the area, and that's great. I don't think we should stop, but we're ultimately the companies we create here, the Operitels of the world, and the companies like here. I mean, these organizations are the ones that are going to continue employing people and giving people a good sense of living, and this is what it's all about, is how do we drive our economy and how do we make the community better, and that's how you do it, through business.
So I had one other, maybe two other pieces with that. I'm sorry, Bill.
No, it's okay. You go ahead.
But
Don't do it again.
Okay, 1 second.
It's okay, you guys can cut it.
I was going to ask him about
We need to get a coffee now, right?
Yeah.
I was going to ask Mike about the Angel Network, what that is.
Well, can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I do my bit first? Just,
okay.
I'm really curious about a few things with the innovation cluster, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course.
One is, so the people who are like in the innovation cluster, it's not like they don't pay for the service, right?
So no. So their first desk is free. So the entrepreneur gets a free desk, and then they do pay $100 a month for each of their subsequent employees. Basically just to sort of teaching individuals that you do have to pay. Not everything's for free,
right.
But no, the idea is you come in for 6 months. Every 6 months you reapply. As long as your business is continuing to grow, we typically let you stay. But it is a competitive process. Every 6 months, everybody, so all the new incoming people that want to come in, everyone has applied, gets kind of flatlined, and we look at all the businesses and say, okay, which are the ones, how many can we support? And really, we've just been continuing to basically grow and become more and more efficient, so we can support more and more companies. And basically, we accept the organizations in, and the intent for them is to drive the economy. So we are funded by the province of Ontario.
Oh, okay.
The city of Peterborough. The Angel Network also gives us some money towards it. The college and the university, so both Trent and Fleming, all pay into our budget, and then we apply for federal funding. Federal's a little different. We basically look for programs that support entrepreneurs, and we apply for them on a case-by-case basis, and that's how we're funded. So we're definitely a government-funded agency with the intent of driving the economy. And so if you look at, and it is a great ROI. So I'll give you a perfect example. So last year, $15 million.
Yes.
Of the $15 million, about $10 million is actually salaries. So think about it. Just the provincial portion alone of that is probably about 15%. So $1.5 million got paid back in employment compensation, and our budget from the province is $200,000. So for $200,000, you get $1.5 million back. As an investor, I would take that any day.
That's a good return.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, we are a not-for-profit organization, but basically every time you create a job, you're creating payroll taxes, which get fed back into the provincial and federal government. And in many cases, other individuals go out and buy houses and upgrade their houses, which feeds back property taxes into the city of Peterborough. So it's a win-win-win for everybody. And when they form companies, obviously they rent office space, which also pays back taxes. But there's a direct ROI between what we get from the government and how much they're collecting back. And it's always a percentage. So we're definitely doing a great ROI for all levels of government, for sure.
And so you're leaving the innovation cluster in the pursuit of the federal Conservative Party. But what is sort of the next steps along with the innovation cluster? Like where does it go from here? Is it like it is what it is now, and you're just going to change the methodologies, or is there more places that it's going to go? Or
so that's a good question. So obviously we've got a new incoming CEO, and John will have so it's an interim role, so I am on a 6-month leave of absence. Obviously, like you said, we're really pushing hard to be our next MP, because I think for me it is the next evolution of everything I've been doing.
That's your next goal.
But the cluster basically is going to continue supporting companies. And so the more and more companies we support, the more and more that gets spun out. And it does change. I mean, the cluster changes every day. Every time a new client comes into the cluster, they have different requirements. And a lot of times we've got to react to their needs and say, okay, well, we need a knowledge partner with this expertise, or we need to go out and find a mentor with this expertise, or where there's a local company that maybe does the same thing and we can get a partnership. So we're always kind of moving and shaking in that world. And then youth-based entrepreneurship. We did a pilot project this year with Junior Achievement to really teach or show grade 7 and grade 8s what it's like to be an entrepreneur. When I ask them, who knows what an entrepreneur is, 1 or 2 of them put up their hands.
1 or 2.
And I asked them how many of their parents are entrepreneurs. 3 or 4 might put up their hands. And I asked them how many of them want to be an entrepreneur. And typically the ones where their parents are entrepreneurs, they put up their hand as well. But that's it.
That's it.
So you get a class size
Nobody
of 50,
else knows.
And there's maybe 5 So 10% of individuals, and they're grade 7, grade 8, I mean, they're still mapping out their career, but if you were to put up your hand and say, how many want to be a doctor, or how many want to be a lawyer, or how many want to be an architect, way more hands are going to go up. And so we want them to think about being an entrepreneur. And being an entrepreneur is running a business. It can be multiple things, right? You can run 5 or 6 different businesses in your lifetime, and they can change. And so we want them thinking about that at a young age. And so the cluster's always really pushed youth-based entrepreneurship. So kind of 18 to 29, which is partly why we have a partnership with Trent University and Fleming College. But adding in junior achievement is we're now starting at a little bit younger age, so they're thinking about it. So when they decide to go off to college, go off to university, they may decide just to stay here in Peterborough and open their business and go to Trent University or Fleming College, as opposed to going off and paying for living accommodation somewhere else. Because many entrepreneurs have built their businesses in their parents' basement, and there's nothing wrong with that as long as you're not 50 and you're still doing it. There's nothing wrong with that at all. I mean, the lower risk that you can have when you're being an entrepreneur, the more chance you're going to be successful.
Okay.
So then my other question, and this is maybe more personally, so the innovation cluster is like fairly focused on technology, right? And then they've got the specialized areas where technology comes in more. And I mean, Peterborough has, for a long time it was considered to be quite heavy in terms of retirees. Mm-hmm. We are quite heavy in terms of we have a fairly large unemployed or homeless rate and things like this, and so in terms of like a technology hub, it seems like an odd fit. You know what I mean? Like we do have the university and the college, but I have a technology company, and one of the things that we struggle with is having technology people in Peterborough, and now with like sort of the rise of remote work, and where there's more and more of that going on, then it's kind of funny. And I was thinking about like how is it that or in your role as the innovation cluster, maybe you have more insight into this than like other people would, but where do the people come from who are doing this tech stuff? Like where's the source of these people who are in tech?
So good question. So a lot of them are out of the college university program. So I would say about a third of our clients today are from the region. And the other, when I say the region, like from Peterborough or Peterborough to Lindsay, the other 2/3 are typically come here from a college university program at some point in time and want to stay. Or they're thinking about staying, and because of us being here, they are deciding to stay, where normally they would have just went back home or went off to Toronto or Ottawa or Montreal or a major center. So we're keeping them here, which is half the battle, is obviously get them to stay here. To your point about, Peterborough being a tech hub, I always wrestled this with Operitel. It was once we got people to consider coming to Peterborough, they loved it here, right? It was just getting them to consider here. And the number one challenge for typically couples, so you have to look at if your demographic from a client base or from a staff base is typically married. So if you've got a husband or a wife, that wants to come to Peterborough, then you're immediately trying to look for a position for their spouse. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is, if there's only one tech company, and when I had Operitel, there wasn't very many tech companies. It was like, okay, but what happens if I lose my job at Operitel in a year? I can't just go work for 15 companies. There's not 30 companies down the street with this in the tech sector. So we always had to overcome those two challenges. But once people got here, I think they love it. And, by building a community, so the innovation cluster, just having things like we do an eConnect, which is what we call once a month. We have 2 local entrepreneurs come in and talk about building a company. It's actually at the venue. It's something that I donated way before I became the CEO of the cluster, and the idea was basically just to get people to come out for a pub night, and they come out and they talk, and they realize that there's like-minded people and that there's companies like this company here. I mean, a lot of people don't know that it exists when you're outside of the city of Peterborough or realize that it's here. I mean, you've got an address for Peterborough, an address for Toronto on the website, so people don't necessarily is it a Toronto company with a satellite office in Peterborough, or is it a Peterborough company with a satellite office in Toronto? Once people realize and meet some of the owners and the entrepreneurs that are part of it, it's like, oh wow, there is a tech sector here. So part of it's the long answer to the short question is that we just want people to realize that we have a community here. And then your point earlier about being an elderly population, to me there's a huge market here which is untapped. So one of the things we added to the innovation cluster as part of our healthcare was accessibility, and starting to look at accessibility technology, because we've got an untapped market of individuals that because of age things are becoming less accessible,
That's me.
and technology can help solve a lot of those issues, and we've got a great test market here. So taking sort of our younger generation coming out of the university and college, and again, about 15,000 students are between the university and college, which is a huge percentage. Adding that to an older generation that have needs, there's an interesting thing there. And the other thing, which I know we've talked a little bit about the Angel Network, but this is
Yes,
the
I'd like
Angel
to-
Network works in this area. So the Angel Network are basically individuals that have, for the most part, because you need to have a certain financial status, you need to be an accredited investor. So in order to be an angel, which is a government regulation, and so you have to have a fair amount of money to be an angel in order to invest in companies. And because of that, typically you're farther on in your career because it's taking you a while to make that money out. And so what we basically have is some older individuals that are part of the Angel Network, and what they're doing is investing back in a lot of the young companies. And so to your point earlier, by taking a population which is older, which typically has a bit more money, and combining it with younger people that have all the passion and drive and energy but no money, and getting those two groups to come together. And that's really what the Angel Network is trying to foster, is taking and the money isn't just money, right? The money comes with mentorship and leadership and experience. So think of experience, money meets young, energetic individuals. Put those two things together, and I think you got a great recipe for potential success. And we're seeing it. I mean, we've got the numbers from our last year. I mean, that's the success of those entrepreneurs. I mean, we talk about how we've created this environment, but ultimately it's the entrepreneurs and the investors that took the risk and drove those organizations and created those jobs.
So with regards to the Angel Network, like I was kind of surprised to hear about this when it doesn't come up naturally in conversation when you're talking about entrepreneurship necessarily with other entrepreneurs in town. But we went to the accountant the other day and we're with Cody and James and they're like, well, the Angel Network is actually pretty incredible in Peterborough. They say that there's a lot of backing there, and there's a lot of power in that Angel Network, more than you'd expect when you're sort of driving around. And so what is the Angel Network? What do you do? So
I've been part of the Angel Network since 2009, 2010.
Okay.
At that time, we had sort of 9 members. So now we're about 35 to 40. It kind of fluctuates a little bit depending on the time of the year. But basically, they're individuals that want to invest back into companies and make a return. So it's not philanthropic in the sense that they're not donations.
Mm-hmm.
Now, many of the angels also have a philanthropic side, but the purpose of the Angel Network is to find investments that have a potential so that the angels can invest. But the model is that you're hoping that sort of 3 out of the 10 investments are successful, so way more risk than a bank ever would have. But obviously the ones that are successful have enough return to cover all the losses that you made on the ones that weren't. But basically, we have a unique set of angels here because I've been to different angel networks. So people in Peterborough very much are investing back into Peterborough. And so the reason why not everyone's heard about it, and people hear about it more today than when I was an angel. You couldn't publish the list of who the angels are when I started. It was like this secret group because it was high net worth individuals that didn't necessarily want anybody to know that they were successful. A lot of them are business owners that still own businesses in Peterborough. And so there's always been this stigmatism around Peterborough, which is actually something I like, that you don't go around flaunting what your worth is. I've always said this, you can be in downtown Toronto and sit at a pub and there'll be a person that sits beside you that might have started a position in the mailroom or something 6 weeks earlier, but they're telling everyone in the pub that they've got 150 employees working for them. Yet in Peterborough, we've got a number of entrepreneurs which have hundreds of employees working for them, and you'll see them picking up cornflakes at the grocery store, and they'll just in a regular clothes pair of jeans.
You see it all the time.
You see it all the time.
Yes,
and that's why I love it as a community, because we don't have the same type of personal flaunting that you get out of other companies. But because of that, the Angel Network at the beginning had some challenges getting people to know who they are, because it was this kind of like a group of people that didn't want anybody to know who they are, but they wanted people to know about them so they could get helped. When I became an angel after the sale of Operitel, I was in a unique position because I could talk about the fact that we were successful, because unfortunately or fortunately, I was bought by a publicly traded company, and the purchase price of my company is a matter of public record. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people knew that we were successful, and so I became a bit of the spokesperson for the Angel Network, because basically it was known that we'd made a significant amount of money when we sold the company, and so it wasn't a secret. I couldn't keep it a secret anyway. So because of that, people kind of came to me and said, hey, are you considering investing in my company? And then I would spin them over to the angel network. And then a lot of the angels, so two things happened. One, the angel network grew itself and we had a lot more members. And the members who were there realized that there wasn't so much of a negative backlash about the fact that they were wealthy, and people, obviously, you have to be an accredited investor, so you have to have a certain amount of net worth in order to be an accredited investor. It wasn't such a big deal after all. And so because of those two things together, I think the network grew. But we've spent a lot of time promoting it. So we work a lot of times with individuals, and Eve LaFortune became on as our executive director for membership. I basically look after all the deal flow, and the two of us together are basically looking after getting more members and more deals, and they go hand in hand. If you have no good companies to invest in, membership drops off. If you have no members to invest, the companies don't bother coming to you because they never get funded. And so you have to have those two things. So the Angel Network acts like a marketplace and just brings investors and investees together, and has a structure. So we work very closely with the people presenting to do a good presentation for those investors so that within 30 minutes they can have a good handle on whether they're interested, and to create an environment for the investors so they want to be there. So one of the other things we did is, I decided to put together a dinner for all the, we used to just meet after dinner quietly in a boardroom at Peterborough Economic Development and it was sort of like you come in, listen to two presentations, and go home. There was no social side of it. There was nothing. And so the idea was, let's make it social.
No mixing.
Let's make it a social side of it. So now you come in at 5:30, have a drink, hang out with like-minded people. Then 6 o'clock the presentation start. You come for a nice dinner, and we basically have 2 to 3 presentations over this period of time. By 9 o'clock you go home. And so there's a social experience. So some of our angels are there because of the social side of it. But then they see great deals and they invest. So it's really bringing the two together. But they've helped a lot of, if you're in the startup tech company sector, Angel Networks is great. And then the other thing which people don't realize is because we're part of the AIO, which is Angel Investment Ontario, we can syndicate. So if you come and you get 10 angels from Peterborough that put $10,000 into your company. So you get a $100,000 injection. Now you can get syndicated across all the angel networks across Ontario. And because we invested in Peterborough, there's much more likely that other people are going to invest. So it's a bit of a viral effect as well. And if you're doing $1 million raise, you get 10 angel networks all to put in $100,000, and there's your $1 million worth of equity that you need.
You want to ask anything else?
I totally do.
Go,
I don't want to step on your toes.
No, go for it. No, go for it.
Okay. So this is slightly political, and so I hope there's a lot of people who after they reach sort of the level of success that you've obviously reached, and they start doing these philanthropic sort of places, and it looks like you've kind of set it up quite nicely in the sense that you're involved in the angel network, which is the people who invest, and you're involved in the entrepreneurs who so you've got the compass and or the steering wheel and the horsepower, right? Mm-hmm. is ultimately what you have, and you're driving this forward, and you're pushing, and this is not something that it's easy to do really in government. Like ultimately, as a business person, one could argue that you have more power with what you've created here than you would as an MP, representing what other people think. Right?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think what I've done and where I think my strengths are, it's two things. I think we talked about is being able to solve problems. I love getting into a problem and solving it. But the other thing is bringing people together. Ultimately, if you look at my career, even when I started Operitel, I brought 3 very smart partners together and a whole bunch of employees, and we built a company. It's been always about bringing different people that come from different backgrounds and different walks of life, and facilitating a way for them to work together. And ultimately, that's what government's job is to do. And so what do I think as an MP, what we're going to do is bring all sorts of like-minded and non-like-minded people together to solve a single problem. The single problem is, how do we make our community better? And so it's what we've seen with the Venture North building and the Innovation Cluster and Peterborough Economic Development and Community Futures and everything that's happening there. It's, no one group can take credit for any of it because it's been a partnership of everybody, and the partnership isn't always easy. You're always keeping your hand on the till, kind of making sure that it keeps together. Everybody thinks it looks easy from the outside, but keeping partnerships together is tough. bringing all the angels together is maintaining them and keeping them active and keeping them engaged and bringing entrepreneurs in. It's tough, but that's the job. And so ultimately, that's what I think a member of parliament does. Their job is to represent the community by bringing all sorts of different groups that have completely different philosophies, but ultimately all of those groups have one purpose, and their purpose is to make our community better. There's some different ways to do it. And so I think an MP needs to bring all those pieces together and be a good facilitator. And so I think it's what this community is lacking right now. I think we've got there's definitely some serious division amongst different groups, and I think we need somebody who's really going to bring it together, and that's what I'm hoping I can bring to the table.
Anything else?
That's your question.
Yeah. No,
Anything else? I've got the hardest question of all.
Okay.
And then we're gonna wrap
And you
up.
guys got to figure out how to edit this down to 5 minutes?
Well,
Oh no!
we'll do it so that it's like we'll actually do the whole segment, and I'll cut out the bits that were whatever. But we'll do mini segments and
cool.
Millions.
5-minute videos.
So hardest question of all, and the last question. We're gonna wrap. I'm gonna wrap it up. Your family.
Mm-hmm.
How do they fit in to all this? Your very busy schedule. How do you do that? I mean, that's the most important people in the world to you.
Yeah, so it's a great question, and it's tough, right? I mean, in some ways, we schedule family time.
You must have a very understanding bride.
Yeah, I do. I mean, my wife is as busy as I am. I mean, Catch is just as involved in the community as I am. She's the co-chair for the New Canadian Centre. And she's been on a number of boards locally. She was part of WBN. I mean, she's very active in the community as well. So we realize that the more involved in the community you are, the better community is going to be. And so we manage our time together. And one of the things for me is Sundays is, for the most part, is my day off. Now it's my family day, and we work pretty hard through the week. And again, we'll put the kids to bed at 7:30. I'll come home after work, play with the kids, have some time. We'll have dinner, typically as a family when we can. There's a few nights a week we can't, but typically have dinner as a family, play with the kids, put them to bed, and then Catch and I will work for a couple hours afterwards. And because some of our businesses are integrated, and both Omega Experience, which is my wife's business, but have an active role in it, and the venue obviously Catch as the CEO, but I still have a bit of a role in there. We talk a lot about business as well, so the two are put together. But Sundays we try for the most part to be just our family day, and it doesn't matter how hard we work through the week as long as we've got that day. But yeah, it's key. And the other thing is we try to integrate. I mean, we do sit around the dinner table and talk about business quite a bit, but my son's starting to pick up on it, right? And he's listening to it, and he's listening to
it's the environment he's growing up in.
Sure. So I don't believe in kind of isolating our kids.
That's everything. The environment they're growing up in.
But it's important, and if I am away for a little while, and again I've traveled all different careers in the last little while. If I'm away, I definitely try and spend as much time as possible. We use FaceTime a lot if necessary, and technology's there. I mean, my interesting sidebar, but my wife's her dad is in Brazil, and yet the kids will call him now. I mean, my 2-year-old picks up his iPad and calls Vovo, which is Grandpa in Portuguese, and clicks the button and calls Vovo and has a conversation. So technology is used a lot in our house in order to continue communication. But yeah, we both, Katja and I, are very, very careful to make sure that we're not neglecting our kids, and we're spending our time with them as well, because they're the most important thing.
I know, it's tough.
So it's balance, right? Everything in life is about balance.
All right. I'm Bill Smerhy, and I'd like to thank Mike Skinner for coming out this morning.
Thank you.
And my production manager, David Helene, for helping out and putting this together. Thanks for watching and listening. David's going to put this on podcast. And goodbye for now.
Thank you very much.